In a previous episode, I spoke about penetration testing, and in that episode, I gave some of the differences between penetration testing and vulnerability scanning. So in this episode, I want to talk more about vulnerability scanning and really lead into the benefits that vulnerability scanning can give to businesses. In fact, I want to make a whole series of videos and build up to vulnerability management programs in general, and then talk a little bit about the benefit of vulnerability management platforms. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Start at the beginning. What is vulnerability scanning? Well, vulnerability scanning is an automation-led, scope-restricted security assessment of the risk of vulnerabilities present in systems. It's a lot of words again. Let's break that down. Scope-restricted. So, just with a penetration test, as you would supply a list of target systems, with a vulnerability scanner, in some way you're going to list target systems as well. That could be just a network range where it's going to scan every machine that it can find in that network, or it might be a specific list of IP addresses or a specific list of URLs. But either way, you're going to tell the system what is it that you would like assessing. Now, another difference between vulnerability scanning and penetration testing here is, with penetration testing, as it's human-led, if you've missed a system from the scope that really should have been included, there is a chance that the pen tester would pick up on that. For example, if I'm testing a web application, and there's some functionality of that web application that's hosted on a different web address, a different URL, and that URL isn't included within the scope, I'm going to talk to the customer about that, and I'm going to say, was this intentional? Would you like this including within the assessment or not? With a vulnerability scanner, if you don't tell it to scan a system, it's not going to scan it, and that's that. You're going to miss that off. Some vulnerability scanners are combined with things like asset management systems so that you can make sure that everything is scanned. And asset management systems often have asset discovery modules, so it's a little bit more complicated than just a list. But in general, with it being automation-led, sometimes mistakes can be made and things can be missed, so it's something to bear in mind. But one of the benefits of it being automation-led, of course, is the fact that you can generally run vulnerability scanners as frequently as you'd like to. Most vulnerability scanners charged either on a monthly or yearly subscription, it's just a license fee, so you can run it as frequently as you want to. For a lot of companies, they don't perform penetration testing nearly as much as they should, or in some instances as much as they'd like to, because with it being consultancy driven, it can get very expensive to run very frequently. So a lot of companies just do pen testing annually. But with vulnerability scanning, it doesn't typically change the price, how frequently you scan, so you can scan as much as you want to, be that quarterly, monthly, weekly, whatever works for you. Some organizations do in fact arbitrarily set a limit on scanning, so they'll do a vulnerability scan quarterly or something like that. Generally, I'm against this. I'm more in favor of continuous scanning, where what you're trying to do is have the systems continuously be tested, such that if a new vulnerability is introduced, you're told about it as soon as possible. One of the things with every security assessment that I try and do, no matter how manual or automated it is reduce that mean time to detection. So if I'm doing a pen test and I find a vulnerability, I am not going to wait until the end of that engagement to start writing a report that has to go through QA before I tell the customer about it. I'm going to tell the customer as soon as I possibly can. So with vulnerability scanning, if you're only scanning quarterly, you're never going to find out about new vulnerabilities the scanner knows about more frequently than that. So if you can reduce that gap between scans, look to scan more continuously, that is going to benefit you. I think some companies don't do that because they worry that it's going to increase the load on their teams. But of course, that is a decision that you can make when something is found. If it's automation-led and it's just scanning in the background, it shouldn't impact anything. As long as you can configure that scanner to notify you when something of interest is found, then you can triage that and take action where appropriate, depending on the resources available, or maybe you have to reallocate some resources, that kind of thing. But scanning more frequently is a big benefit of vulnerability scanning. And in fact, that is the major benefit in comparison to pen testing. Yep, pen testing is going to find issues that vulnerability scanning doesn't. You're not going to find a vulnerability scanner that finds business logic vulnerabilities and things like that. You're going to find scanners have a difficult time finding certain classes of vulnerabilities, especially to do with things like sensitive information leakage. That can be an area that scanners struggle with, that a pen tester really shouldn't struggle with. But the amount of scans that you can do, the frequency of scans is going to bolster that. Some companies try and combine these two things together. So when they have a penetration test once a year or whatever frequency they do, they ask the pen tester, whilst you're here, can you run a vulnerability scan? And of course, typically that's no problem at all for the pen tester, something they can do. But it's not really where you want to be focusing the pen tester's time. If you're paying for an expensive consultant who's an expert at a certain thing, you don't want to wear them down by scanning as well. if you can build the capability internally to perform vulnerability management and vulnerability scanning internally, it's going to be far more effective. You're going to do it far more frequently. And you're not going to be wasting that specialist's time if it could be better applied elsewhere. If you're worried that your team doesn't have the expertise to set up a scanner and to understand the output, then you can still work with a pen testing company to do that. Absolutely, as a pen tester, I'll come in and I'll show you how to set the scanner up, how to use the scanner, and then if it finds things, a lot of the vulnerabilities that scanners find, you'll find are actually relatively easy to deal with. It's going to be things like missing patches, misconfigurations, those kinds of things. And the scanner is going to tell you how to mitigate that. But if there's anything that it doesn't tell you, you're not sure what to do, or maybe it requires a code change or something like that, and you need a little bit of expertise, you can engage a security consultant or a pen tester at that time. So don't be put off with vulnerability scanning if you're not necessarily security experts. Get some help setting it up, get some help understanding how to run it and what the output means, and then if you need additional ad hoc consultancy, that's something that can be done easily as well. That is a lot of words to say. It is my recommendation that every company should perform vulnerability scanning internally. They shouldn't be leaving that to the pen tester, or they should set up some cadence so that that happens much more frequently than they're doing pen testing. And any time a vulnerability is found, you should triage that vulnerability to see, is this something that requires immediate action? Is it some just additional action to be rolled into something like your patch management cycle? Or is it something simple that you can handle, just open a ticket for a configuration change, something like that? So vulnerability scanning is really good. Very often when you talk to pen testers or you talk about penetration testing, it makes it seem like vulnerability scanning isn't that great, because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the benefits of pen testing, how there's classes of vulnerabilities that we can find that scanners can't, how penetration testing is more accurately going to grade the risk of security vulnerabilities, how penetration testing is going to be able to chain vulnerabilities together, it's going to be able to demonstrate exploitation, it's going to have lower false positive rates, and all of that is true. But if you're only performing penetration testing on a slow cycle, something like once a year, an awful lot can happen in a year, and vulnerability scanning is just one of those tools in the toolbox to address those changes and to do something in the meantime. So it's a useful tool for your organization.